Welcome to Talk to the Expert at property-investors.co.nz. Today we have Kyle Almer with us, Managing Director of Mana Property Management in Dunedin. Kyle is a sitting president of the Otago Property Investors Association and is a seasoned investor himself. Today we are going to talk about 10 ways to add value to your tenants and your property. Hi Kyle, and welcome to this interview.
Hi there, how you going?
Good. So let's talk about the 10 ways we can add value to the property and add some value for increasing those rents. Which ways would you suggest are the best proven ways from your experience as a property manager?
We have a process that we go through. We'll start with a standard rent figure. For example, in Dunedin at present, that's probably around about $265, $270 a week mark as an average figure. And then we do what we call a rent set, and we can actually add to or take away from that average figure depending on location. And these figures that we use obviously are based around Dunedin, but they'll be fairly proportional around the country. One of our first ones is adding off-street parking or garaging. If we find we've got a position to example, add a carport or a garage preferably, we can add somewhere between $10 to $25 a week extra on the rent figure between a carport and a garage. The additional benefit of having a garage would be that sometimes you can actually rent the garage out separately to the existing building depending on the layout of the property and the other areas around it. So that gives you a different income stream at different times.
This is correct. We come across a lot of properties in Auckland, for example, where I usually invest and trade. Many property has a garage which is being converted for a sleep out. This needs to be done legally, and this could generate some sort of extra rent. Usually it needs to be rented for the same tenancy. If it doesn't have a separate legal inhabitable area with the council, or if it's not a separate legal inhabitable area with the council and it doesn't have a cooking facility, it needs to be rented under the same tenancy. Is this correct?
Generally, yeah. We don't have that kind of situation so much in Dunedin, so we'd have to check our council rules to be sure, or your council rules in your areas. But yes, some areas you can create that extra sleep out style facility, and it would therefore be part of the existing tenancy.
Okay, so what point is point number 2?
Point 2 is generally heating. Nowadays, people are starting to believe heat pumps are almost a given. They're becoming the standard type feature, much like a dishwasher used to be in the past. The heat pump now, for selling as a benefit, you're getting into second or third heat pumps into buildings. Generally, what we would do with a facility, if the tenants want the benefit of a heat pump, we'll actually upsell that on their rental figure. So if they are coming requesting it, we'll try and go for $15 or $20 a week extra rent, and the owner will be happy to put one in for you. That way, generally, the cost of the heat pump to the owner has been covered off and paid for by the time the 5 or 6 year warranties run out.
Yes, definitely. There is also, I would like to mention that for any heating in parts of New Zealand, in some parts of New Zealand, any heating could receive subsidies by Energy-Wise and various other organizations who support landlords and tenants. Majority of the tenants, if they have a community service card, if your tenant has a community service card, you can get a percentage of the cost of the heat pump subsidized by one of those bodies, which you can check online under, for example, Energy-Wise website.
Yeah, the other thing to think of when you're doing that, if you're going to do a heating appliance through Energy-Wise, is they'll generally require the building to be up to standard on insulation as well. So you'll find you can actually get a grant for the insulation and then get a further grant for the heat and appliance. Nowadays insulation's becoming a given, and whereas it will be an increase in rent, what you'll find is it's actually more likely a decrease in rent if you haven't got from the average figure than it would be an actual physical increase on your rent. So, for example, that 265, 270 average we have in Dunedin, uninsulated might be nearer the 250 mark, rather than saying I'll add insulation and get that figure up from the 265, 270.
Right. And generally speaking about heating, which one you think is more in demand, or which one tenants like more? Because when you have a heat pump, the tenant needs to pay for electricity. When you got a wood burner, the tenant needs to go and get wood and get through the hassle, let's call it, of getting wood delivered to the premises. Dunedin is quite a hilly town. Some places you won't be proper access for a truck to come and drop the wood, or generally speaking, you will need to have property set up quite well to be able to store the wood as well. So which one is more in demand from your experience?
From our experience, more of the people are going toward heat pumps. They like the press and forget, set it on a thermostat type of ease of life, especially when most people are now two-income families or both having to go out to work. They haven't got the time for running around with the timber. We do find in the lower end properties, or marginally lower end, they do like a wood burner if you've got one. So many people seem to have access to free timber. It's quite a common comment coming through, or if I had the free, I've got access to free timber, so I had the wood burner would be great. So it is a good, if you've got them, it's definitely worth keeping them and keeping them serviced up, keeping your chimneys done to try and lengthen the life of them, especially in that mid to lower end of the market. Either ors are good, and also secondary heat sources as a heat pump are really good. So if you've got the wood burner, try wherever you can to add the extra 10 to 20 bucks a week and get a second heat source as a heat pump, maybe down the hallway, and that can take the edge off all of the bedrooms and flow through to the living areas where the main heat source already is.
Okay, so to recap quickly through the points we just covered, the first point was parking. Anything like a garage or a carport or even an off-street parking would potentially add value to your property and make it more desirable to tenants. Obviously, the garage is the most desirable one. That's point number one. Point number two, we got the heating, which we just covered, a heat pump, a wood burner, whichever is available or whichever you could obtain. This is point number two. Point number three, we covered the insulation side of it. Let's go a little bit more in depth in regard to double glazing. How important is double glazing? Generally speaking, from my experience in the Auckland market, it is important there as well, and people always look at it favorably. More in Dunedin. So, what about double glazing?
Double glazing so far hasn't really come onto the market enough for it to be desired yet. Obviously, at the top end of the market, it's a little bit different, and a number of the more exec level properties that we deal with will get people requesting it or looking for it as a preference from one property to another, but there isn't an awful lot of stock yet that has double glazing, so it hasn't shown much increase in the rents yet, certainly not to the level of the cost extra that you're looking at to put it in. There are subsidy schemes now coming through, again with ECA and things, so there is the potential to do that through a scheme. Again, if you're looking at the schemes, try and find out if your tenant's got a community services card. This can get you higher subsidies or further up the list to get people in. I actually this week have spoken to the Otago Community Trust as my position on the OPIA, and they're actually looking at helping lower income families or families and struggling at the moment, and possibly putting together a funding source for them and working in line with the investors. And obviously, if you keep an eye on the Otago Property Investors site or you're already a member, if we get links into those kind of schemes, we'll keep them up to date from there.
Great stuff. And to take in account the financial outcome from installing a heat pump, let's say a heat pump is going to cost you after the subsidy, let's say in the vicinity of $2,000. If you pay $2,000 for a heat pump and you're receiving an increasing rate in rent of around $20 a week, this is equivalent for an extra $1,000 a year of rent, which is basically 50% of your money back coming in by rent in year 1. Year 2, you will be getting all your money back, and year 3, it's your investment in the heat pump and improving the property is there, and you can enjoy the benefit of the extra cash flow. So this is was the points we will mention in this video. We will end part 1 now, and we look forward recording part 2 very shortly. If you would like to come and visit us on property-investors.co.nz, you can find Kyle and Tanya's article. Tanya is there writing as well. She's a director, Kyle's partner, and she's a director as well in Mana Property Management in Dunedin. They have great articles there on a monthly basis. You're welcome to come and visit. Thank you, Kyle, for part 1, and we look forward to recording part 2 so we can cover all the points. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thanks for that.